Sudan is one of a number of countries that has been going through extraordinarily difficult times over the past number of years. See Myanmar, where a civil war rages against a military dictatorship, or Bangladesh, where unrest recently led to the flight of the prime minister from the country, or, obviously, Gaza, where resistance to genocide rises only a bit above survival. But these events don't exist in isolation. Each fight is separate, with its own history and specific circumstances, but there is obviously an international breakdown of social, environmental, economic, and civil society as the ruling authorities, the ruling elites, vie with each other over who's to be the top dog. This gives us, the majority, only one option: to find a way to fight, and hopefully to find a way to win. We want to thank you for joining us in Facing Reality for Social Justice as we look beyond the headlines to find, at least today in Sudan, to start to search for an explanation of the crisis. Today's podcast is the first of 3 parts of an interview. Khalid Sidahmed, who recently participated in an interview with Hudson Mohawk Magazine Radio in Troy, New York, at WOOC 105.3 FM. Khalid Sidahmed is from the MENA Solidarity Network. That's Middle East North Africa Solidarity Network. We'd also like to thank Lennox Apudo, who produced this interview, for permission to play it on our podcast. Stick around after the interview for some Sudanese music, which we took from our Internet Archive. But first, here's Part 1, Sudanese War, Part 1, how the revolutions of the past shape today's war.
10th, the Times Union reported that the number of internally displaced people in Sudan has reached over 10 million. In April 2023, a war broke out between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, also known as the RSF. The war is a power struggle between General Abdel Fattah Burhan, chief of the Sudanese Armed Forces, and General Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, also known as Hemeti, chief of the RSF. This is the first of 3 segments to help us deconstruct the issues that led to the eruption of war in Sudan this past year, and the resilience of the Sudanese people that is helping them through these tough times of war and desperation. This segment focuses on the revolutions that have happened in the country and how they have shaped the people and their politics. We'll be speaking with Khalid Sidahmed, an anti-war campaigner and a member of the editorial board of the Middle East and North Africa Solidarity Network, MENA Solidarity, based in England. He's also a trade unionist, a member of the Portsmouth Trade Council, and the quality officer of Unite the Union, the second largest trade union in the United Kingdom. Welcome to the show, Khalid.
Morning, Lennox, and very good morning to everyone in Albany and Troy. Although it's a bit later here in the afternoon in England, I'm glad to be joining you on Hudson Mohawk Magazine today to discuss the situation in Sudan.
It's a pleasure to have you here, Khalid. So my first question is, Sudan has gone through a couple of revolutions which are connected to the struggles that serve as the context in which today's war is taking place. So could you tell our listeners what happened in 1964 during the October Revolution and later in 2018 during the Second Arab Spring, and how the legacies of these revolutions impact the country today?
Yeah, so in general, Sudan's fight for a democratic and civilian-led government, peace, and fair distribution of wealth is a quite long and complex story, and goes even before Sudan gained independence from the British colonialism in 1956. So, the British built the Sudanese army to protect their own economic interests, not Sudan's. This focus on the military power left a lasting mark, which what we see today. So Sudan's institutions, like its government and legal system, weren't strong enough to handle the country's diversity after independence. So we saw different ethnicities, religions, regions, and all of them, they had their own interests. And these weak institutions just couldn't handle it. And this weakness fueled the class struggles and made Sudan more likely to see military coups become a way to grab power. And also, that's why Sudan has the unfortunate record of having the most military coups in Africa, 17 attempts in just over 68 years. That's quite a staggering number. And that's almost one coup every 4 years on average. Yeah, and 13 of these attempts failed, while 3 succeeded, and 1 is currently ongoing. Now, if we go back to the one which I said in progress, or the coup in progress, which I mentioned earlier, that's the coup of 25th of April 2021 by General Burhan and Hemeti, who are fighting each other right now. But although at that time, they were allies and friends. So the bottom line from what I just said is that during the last 68 years and 5 months exactly since the Independence Day on the 1st of June 1956, we had 60 years of military rules. And this brings me back to the second part of your question, how the legacies of these revolutions impact the country today. Well, the legacy of these revolutions and the broader struggle, because we didn't have only revolutions, there were uprisings, there were protests, there were lots of activities to resist oppression. But the conclusion is a quite complex situation, but they continue to shape the ongoing fight for civilian-led government, economic and social fairness, and peace in Sudan. Yeah.
And, like listening to your response, it just makes me think of something that maybe is not talked about often, about how when, colonial powers established colonies across Africa and other native places, and the legacy of militarism and, that heavy-handed kind of rule shaped the understanding of politics of native people. And then, to a point where now the politics is one of militarism instead of like deliberation or some other more less heavy-handed form of rule. Now my second question is, following the large-scale protests in Sudan calling for civilian rule, a power-sharing agreement led to a shared government between civilians and the military in 2019. Can you tell me more about the reasons behind this shared government structure rather than a complete transition to civilian rule?
This is actually a great question, Lennox. But to understand this, we need to rewind a bit to the 1989 coup, which I did mention earlier, which was executed by Omar al-Bashir and the Muslim Brotherhood. So the fight against Omar al-Bashir and the Muslim Brotherhood regime, they started the day he took power in 1989. The regime cracked down brutally, firing hundreds of thousands of civil servants, imprisoning opponents, and using violence to silence dissent. They controlled everything in the country. They filled government offices with their own people, used the military and the militias to steal resources, and even fuel tensions between different groups in Sudan. So this tactic of dividing and conquering ultimately led to the loss of South Sudan in 2011 and the formation of at least 8 armed militias and armies, in addition to the state-controlled army, which is the militia which is fighting the army right now, is one of them. But then after that massacres of June 3rd, 2019, political parties and some armed groups representing the forces for freedom and change, which shortened to FFC, led negotiations with the military council. But instead of a complete transition to civilian rule, they were pressured by the US, the EU, Israel, and Britain to sign the 2019 constitutional declaration agreeing to a 39-month transition period leading to elections. And obviously this wouldn't happen because you're sitting with the same killers. Millions of people came outside opposing.
Right.
But the revolutionary forces, they rejected this constitutional declaration and continued their marches and strikes. Then until we got to October 25th, 2021, where the military side of the government, led by General Burhan al-Himiti, executed a coup, imprisoning the civilian ministers, including the Prime Minister Hamdok. But even before the coup was announced, the revolutionaries filled the streets, and there were hundreds of thousands on the streets across Sudan rejecting that coup. From then until the war began, daily marches, sit-ins, and strikes persisted, preventing the coup leaders from forming a government. But again, the same forces of the US, the EU, Israel, and Britain, after the coup, pressured the civilians again to sign a framework agreement with the military, which essentially is a resurrection of the 2019 declaration. So we had the disastrous one in 2019 declaration, and now they're trying to push another one similar to it. In my personal opinion, one of the main reasons behind this is the absence of a revolutionary party. So when you have a revolutionary party during revolutions, this is quite crucial thing to have, because it provides organized leadership for the revolutionary forces. It gives them clear ideological direction and a unified strategy, which is quite important for these critical moments of during revolutions. And all these elements are essential for the mobilization and the coordination between the masses to bring them all up together, and executing decisive actions and sustaining the momentum needed to achieve the consolidate revolutionary goals. So all these things work together if you have a revolutionary party.
That was Khalid Sidahmed talking about Sudan. Now, two pieces of music from Sudan.
أحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة الإسلام السلام. تحرموني سنة الإسلام والسلام. أحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة الإسلام والسلام. عفوكم يا من علموني كالأشياء الألهم رموني السجون بالليل هدموني الأنين والنوع علموني دموعا عن قول كلموني وقفاي اللي ما تظلموني برضي قبل ظلم احترام. أحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة الإسلام والسلام. أحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة الإسلام والسلام. كل من سمد عطروني وأجون دموعي معطروني ربي أغفر ليل عكروني بودعة البار نعروني وبوغة يتذكروني ويقول القائل زروني أو يحدث عني الله 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 الله. أحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة الإسلام والسلام. عروني ربي أغفر للعكروني في وزعة البار نعروني وقت يتذكروني ويقول القائل دروني أو يحدث عني الله 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 تحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة السلام السلام
أحرموني ولا تحرموني سنة الإسلام السلام
خيالك والليل كافر شفت بدر المتجلي سافر صد غاضب لقدم عدافر اللي جملة وعقدوا الأظافر اللي طبع الرياض منافر
We just heard two pieces from Sudan. The first was with Awad Al-Karim Abdullah, and the second was from Sadak Mohammed Wardi. I don't know the language, but I enjoyed listening to the music. I hope you did as well. This was part one of the three-part interview with Khalid Sidahmed. We'll have the other two parts coming soon, and I hope you'll listen in. And I'm Wayne Heimbach.